to discuss more on generally the philosophy of animals, but what we're going to get into today uh, is animal speech and animal exemplarity. So, John, thanks for again for your willingness to get together and talk about this,
Thanks for
and
having me
for
again.
yeah, it's happening again, and something has been established. So, we both have this interest, a common interest in philosophy of animals, and uh, you know, I find it very interesting. Uh, it can be somewhat difficult to articulate just what is so enthralling about it, but animal speech is, uh, I think, it's one of those subjects that pertains to it, right? And I want to start by sort of framing animal speech in the following way, right? Uh, we tend to think that animal speech is always something that must conform to uh, to human speech, but animals are their own kind of functional uh, unity, right? You think of Wittgenstein's famous uh, uh, comment on this, right? Like to imagine a language is to imagine a form of life. If a lion could speak, we wouldn't understand what it's saying, right?
Hmm.
Kind of suggesting or indicating that the speech of a lion is not human speech. It's something unique to itself. However, at the same time, uh, we're very much, I think, in many ways, beholden to a sort of fictional being about animal speech. Like that may be the case that they have their own speech and language that's not ours, but there's a desire for animals to express themselves in a way that we would understand them, right? So you think of like C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, right? Aslan gave the beasts the gift of human speech, right? Um, and there's something quaint and nice about that, but at the same time, right? Aslan would take that speech away if the animals chose to return to their wild ways of living, right? So there may be a desire for animals to express themselves or communicate in a way that we really understand, that accords with how we understand language to be. Um, but we can't really get away, even in the fictional world, the beings of reason, we can't really get away from the the limitation that's inserted even in those worlds upon animals, and that limitation always has to do with their natural form of life. So, according to you, what is animal speech, and um, in which ways does it find expression in what we mean by speech or language? Which ways does it not? Is animal speech intelligible to us? Uh, can we truly understand it, or uh, does it remain something of a mystery, a natural mystery of sorts?
Um, I think, I guess the first question is how we would define speech, right? Uh, uh, if you mean things like sentences and propositions, so you can't just give you can give like a laundry list of words or like a grocery list, right? Like apple, orange, eggs, milk, and so forth. But I don't think any of us would say that's a sentence. So for a sentence, you have to have some sort of words that signify things, but then that also are like put together in some sort of intelligible order where I would say it's not quantitatively reducible to like the sum of its parts, right? There's like a greater kind of meaning in a sentence taken as a whole, that I need milk from the grocery store, than if you were to just list kind of those different words separately, right? Like line by line. I think if you're thinking on that level, uh, then I think that's something really just proper to human beings or rational or intelligent sort of creatures with intellect. But I think I think even many, probably if not most researchers in animal cognition, I think would agree with me on this. That even like the ape language studies they've done on like Nim Chimpsky or even like Coco the gorilla, the overwhelming majority, I think, of people would agree actually that these cases aren't actually technically speaking even sentences. Right now, if you talk though about do animals like communicate uh, in some sense, then yes, I think so. But I think it's non-propositional and non syntactical. So you can there's cases where you have like vervid monkeys give off like alarm calls. So if there's like some sort of bird in the air that's a predator, they give off some sort of alarm call, so they all run. Or if there's like a snake on the ground, some other sort of alarm call, so they can all run up to the trees or away from it. And these are like distinctive sorts of calls that they give. That's where I think you have, sure, perhaps there's some like signification, right? Kind of like in English, we would say like run for the bushes, right?
Hmm.
Or stay out of the open areas, run for the bushes because there's like a bird of prey in the air. But that's like, how do I say? It's like you can give smoke signals for things, right?
Hmm.
Or what Paul Revere, what is it? One if by land, two if by sea, right? Right.
Yeah.
So you can have bells ring, right? There's some meaning for something, or you can have like a candle that's lit or such, right? So I think it's kind of more something like that, where you have a sound that has a signification, but it's not syntactical or um, I mean, it can be interpreted by us that way, right? But it's not like it has some sort of meaning on the level as like a sentence proper, I would say. So I think animals could have something like that. I mean, there is maybe simpler explanations people could give, or maybe I think it's just kind of like you see something and yeah, you yell, right? But um, I'm willing to say there is communication. I would say broadly speaking, and then that they have sounds that I think have significance to them, but not at the same I think level as is what's really proper to humans. It is my view. I think from some of the research that's out there. So I
Yeah.
think the language. I mean, how you define it. Uh, uh, at least in a certain sense, we could say maybe it's proper to humans. If by language you mean things like sentences, but if you
Yeah.
mean language in like a general sense of just uh, like communication, then that would be something different, right?
Yeah. Yes. I'm thinking of uh the sort of the nature of the effect of a signifier. So to go back to Wittgenstein, right? Remember Wittgenstein, uh, he gives this he gives this uh, idea of these linguistic forms as they enter into a particular way of life. So like the worker who's working on a house will just say slab, right? And the gesture, the cue, everything going on with that uh, kind of forms a whole uh, sentential command. Like by saying
Mm-hmm.
slab, the other worker gives a slab. They have practice and experience in this form of life, and so when I say slab, you give me the brick. We put it on the concrete. And so that one signifier sort of connotes a whole um, uh, 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 way of being, right? That one has become accustomed to through practice and experience and so on. And I think about that with animals, right? Like the animal is giving out some chemical signal. There's some material cause. There's some auditory cause. There's some sound, and then the animals sort of respond to that, right? Well, they may. Someone might say, oh well, when a signal is sent out and the animals respond to it, that's because they they are sensing that signal as some underlying sort of reality. Like they've thought about it. They're contemplating what the signal means. But you don't need that when it comes to communication. Uh, we do this all the time, right? If I'm with my children and you know, and I'm fixing something and I say, Alice, milk. Um, she goes right to get the milk. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need to contemplate or think deeply about what that
Mm-hmm.
verbal command, if you will, a verbal signal means.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, this happens to me a lot. It pertains to the practical dimension of life. But I mean, what would you say to someone who uh, uh, is trying to give an account of animal communication in this way, and they tend to view it as they're trying to give an account of it, and in giving an account, they view it as animals are these subjects of a life, and there's actually this deep sort of thing going on in their world, such that you couldn't reduce the signifier to just like a material cause or just something by instinct or just something practical that they do.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say in response to someone giving an account like that?
Um, so I mean, I think there are similarities, I think, to the milk example, but there's also, I guess, like big differences, right? So sometimes there's cases where, how do we say, the effects could be kind of the same, right? But then the cause is different. So
Mhm.
there's going to have to be some appeal, I think, to some sort of formal causes here, even for
Mhm.
animals, right? Because it's not just, I don't think it's like sheer mechanism. It's just like a mouse trap, right? Where like something presses
Yeah,
on and then you have a reaction, or like if you press what, like a button on, let's see here. I have actually,
nice.
this is for a future study that I'm going to hopefully do with parrots. But this is like, those cat buttons.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. So
Uh-huh.
you could press it. That you could train a cat when anytime it needs to what, have a door open so it can go to the bathroom. Where you could train it where the president would say litter box, but this I have as
Yeah.
programmed as yellow, right? Like I don't think we'd say that this thing is actually what, communicating with me, even though I can say what color is this? Yellow. Look, got the right answer,
Yeah.
right? But I think there's, I think I'm sure we both agree, right, that there's more going on in the case of animals, right? Because they're living, right? So there must be a principle of life, so they have to have souls, not the same type of souls as humans.
Hmm.
And then there's has to be some sort of cognition because it's not like they're just robots interacting with their surroundings, but they're going to have well the notice of particularities as actionable somehow related to them through through their estimates of power that they cognize. So uh, uh, like if there's like the bird in the sky, right? This is something some particular cognizes to like be avoided or run from, right? So if there's a sound then that's emitted, it would have like this sort of signification as like this is kind of like this is signifying the as run away, right? Um, which is I think hard to in some ways I think we can kind of we can what talk about and it's intelligible to us like what animals do, but from a first person perspective, um, unless we're what sleepwalking
Yeah.
or have gone literally insane, it's basically impossible for us really to first person know what this is like. Because anytime we put language
Sure.
on it using like abstract terms, right, like milk or such, right, uh, then I think we're at a totally different level there. Or unless you can remember, I don't know what it was like when you were what 4 years old, maybe, or three,
Mm-hmm.
before you had any abstract concepts or very few, right?
Mm-hmm.
What it was like for action in that case. Is definitely able to like interact with the world. So, and that if so, here's some of the complexities, I guess, of language, right? So, like in the milk example, right? Um, usually it's like a universal term, right? Unless you mean this milk, right?
Hmm.
But it could also be interpreted as like it's like basically a command, like go get me the milk out of the fridge, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a full blown proposition, right? But sometimes we kind of have like shorthand ways of signifying that, right? You can have other terms that signify other ones, or one term to signify a whole sentence. Like yes would be an example. It's just kind of repeating what the person said in agreement. But for animals, it's just like you can like when people train dogs, they'll say sit, right? But for all you know, you could give like a full blown sentence, or to get them to sit, you could just clap your hands
Hmm.
or light a match, and that'd be like a signal for them, right? So there
Yeah.
is, I think, um, signification very much is tied to action. They're not really caring about anything in the abstract here, right? So like you can think about milk in the abstract or sitting in the abstract apart from some particular person sitting. Uh, Whereas for animals, it's always very action oriented. Then I don't think they really care about anything speculative,
Hmm.
right? Um, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that uh, is that kind of a answering it, or were we going? Am I going a different
Yeah,
direction
sure.
here?
No, that's helpful. Yeah, animals, cognitively speaking, are like perpetual children. Um, uh,
There was a description once actually I read. There's an article by John Deely.
yeah, yeah.
I forget
Semiotics, probably.
the name of it off the top of my head. I don't think it's in a book. It's very long, like 40 some page article where
Yeah.
he mentions, I think he might be quoting somebody, but that the basically the animal mind is the pragmatist paradise.
Hmm.
And I like that quote because it's
Hmm.
literally all just about does this relate to something in action. So I think this happens sometimes when people are like they talk to their dog, right? Which is fine. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I talk to animals too, even though I know they don't fully get everything.
Yeah.
Um, that unless you have like certain words that you've trained them on, or you can yell the word within there, like wondering what's going on, right? Um,
Yeah.
they don't really care at all
Yeah.
about the content of what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
Even though
right.
we like to think they do, right? Which is fine, right? To some extent. But it's always related very much to something in their world as to what they can get or obtain or avoid,
Yeah.
I think. Whereas for us, we can talk about things that maybe we're not really, we could talk about the nature of milk without necessarily wanting to take a drink of it or
Hmm.
wondering how we can store it for somewhere in the future or such, right? Um, so I think
Hmm.
this is another kind of uh, difference, right? So we can use language to wonder what language is, even though most of the time it's very what practical we could say, right? I think for most people,
Hmm.
unless maybe they're in philosophy,
Yeah.
academia, very practical, action oriented, right? So I think there's we have a different sort of use, I think, that we have for language that I think animals don't have that you don't find.
Certainly. I'm thinking if we could just uh I imagine stepping into the animal mind is a lot like stepping into the mind of a child just without the ability to use language, right?
Yeah.
Like I think of my children, I mean, talk about just only caring about being so action oriented that they're not caring about the content. Uh, They will, they'll ask me for candy and I'll say no, and I'll give some further qualification or explanation for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, um, no, uh, you know, later, maybe later, or not until you eat your your dinner, and it's like they don't even hear that
Hmm.
at all
Hmm.
because they'll make a sound, oh, like complaining, you know, conveying their grievance through just a sound.
Hmm.
And then, but I want some, like, there's enough of awareness of the content to know that this
Hmm.
person is saying no or denying me what
Hmm.
I'm pursuing in action. Uh, but most of it's not heard because all I'm thinking about is uh, pursuit of what's beneficial to me or what
Hmm.
I think is beneficial to me, and not the content of what's being said. Even though I put a lot of thought usually into the content of what I say
Hmm.
with that because I'm trying to assuage their you know their grievance and make it seem not so bad. And sometimes it's a lecture. It's like, Alice, we can't have candy whenever we want. Can't just,
Hmm. Hmm.
yada yada. And it's just not heard. And to think of an animal as just that without being of the kind of a thing that a human is corporally, right? An animal is not a human being.
Hmm.
Peter Singer ignores that, but that's a huge point of difference. But but cognitively, I mean, there's a lot of similarity. And then the further um, stipulation made with that is that cognitively it's very similar, but animals don't have this capacity for language.
I think
Um,
maybe one of the things that I think that is kind of interesting. So for us, we take a long time to like grow into adulthood, so to speak. That we need a lot of years of education, many years, because there's just so much to learn about the world and society and so forth. Uh, but for animals, well, in some ways it's not quite as complex. I mean, there's like some they got to deal with all the elements, which is crazy. Predators, so forth. Sometimes depending upon if they're like a social animal with other members of the troop, right? For example.
mhm.
Um, but I think in many cases they're at least born with more instincts than humans,
Hmm,
where they just
interesting.
instinctually learn like don't do this, do that, or eat that thing, don't eat this, because otherwise they would end up dead in many cases. Particularly
Yeah,
if in some species the parents basically what just abandon the young at a super early age and just kind of leave them off on their own, right? If they didn't
yeah,
have these instincts where they just naturally recognize this thing as to be chased and eaten, they would literally die. Whereas I think humans in this case are actually at like a disadvantage very early on. Like children, what they put their fingers in like the outlets.
yeah.
They
Right.
have like no idea about things. Don't run across the road with all these cars driving down it. That I think,
Yeah,
at least compared to many animals, I think like our instincts that we naturally have are I think are very few. Whereas we have to have like a whole lot of learning, and ultimately we can go way further than any animal can. Uh, but that's why so I guess in some cases this is why I would
yeah,
agree with Singer in this case that I think certain animals are more intelligent than like infants or very young children, at
yeah,
least in some general sense of intelligence, right? So like capuchin monkeys or probably even pigs than maybe like a human 2 year old, right? But it's just it takes a long time because for the intellect to what abstract these sorts of universals or abstract concepts, we have to have a whole lot of sense experience. It's not like the first time necessarily always happens.
yeah,
And then just language development where you what predicate a universal of some subject, right? We can form propositions where it's not
yeah.
just about like this particular milk here, right? But milk in general, you can say is what is white, right?
Hmm.
Predicate white of it. That takes like a long time for the language acquisition and then to do it properly without the mistakes and such.
Yeah,
Uh, but you have to have all the sensorial experience first, right? So um, it's also, I think, a testament to how cognitively rich we are. I think ultimately compared to animals, why I think it takes so long.
yeah. That's a good point to make. Um, I always thought Singer's like the intelligence criterion or whatever. I always thought he was correct about that, but as you started to get to there in terms of universals and universals and predication, substance accident, and so on, he misses what what accounts for the um, the reality of universal being in the distinction of genus and kind. Like for example, when Bonaventure's accounting for universals, um, he makes it known that the universals come by way of corporality, animality, and humanity, right? And so if you're missing any one of those, it makes it very difficult to make sense of um, uh, differences in kind. Um, but I think you showing or getting at that idea of animality and how humans are at say a disadvantage with respect to animals and how animals have a particular advantage. That's beautiful because it highlights that difference in kind, right? But then without an understanding of what humanity is, and now without an understanding of what corporality is, there might be a tendency to blow out animality to a point where you say, "Oh, let's euthanize humans because, you know, they're stupid or they've got these serious defects and animals are so much smarter." You kind of get the point, I think. Uh, and so that's excellent. Like, hey, animals are so dignified. They have these compounded uh, instincts that allow them to survive and thrive according to their way of life, and humans don't have that. And yet, what makes human learning so distinctive of a kind of life is that humans have a lot more to learn. Um, on one hand, takes longer, but on the other hand, the lack of instincts, makes the human unique. It we could say it says more for paternal care in that way of life,
Mhm, mhm.
because you're totally right. My children do. Just the other day, my daughter got poop out of the toilet, and
The
it's
things we
like,
do when we are very young, right?
yeah,
Right.
I know
I'm sure
it's wild.
we all have many of us probably have done crazy things when we were kids, right?
Yeah. Uh, to my daughter's credit, though, if I've known dogs uh to find poop very delectable and tasty. So, um, that's instinct maybe working in two different ways, right?
There's what how do you say it? Coprophagia,
I don't know that. I don't know that
the
term.
name, eating one's own poo. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's
Uh,
like a medical term or
uh, Coprophagia. Yeah, I think that's how it's said. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, this happens, right?
we had a hunting
Oh,
dog.
yeah.
It was oh, I forget what breed it was. Short hair pointer, I think. Um, Patches and Patches this is the
Hmm.
worst case of this I've ever seen in a dog. I mean, Patches would just be waiting for uh the defecated material to drop, And Patches was a great hunting dog, but died of brain cancer, like
Oh no.
4 years old.
Hmm.
And I always like, I don't know if this is like veterinary narrative, medical narrative, self-narrative stuff, but I always associated Patches consuming that material to his brain cancer.
Was it her?
I
It was Patch's own poo.
No, well,
Oh,
his, but also other dogs too.
oh, strange.
Yeah, it was it was just a like very accelerated like disease,
Yeah. Huh.
just the rate at which he did it. And it'd be interesting to study more on actually.
Yeah.
Does that correlate to brain cancer? Um,
Sometimes I think this is interesting. Sometimes it's hard to know why animals do what they do in some cases, right? So obviously there's like they're naturally cognizing this thing as edible and desiring to eat it, but why in like certain particular cases can be, I think, hard to like kind of discover, which I think does relate to. I mean, I know we're not maybe another time for the ethics, but people sometimes make claims like, well, um, uh, you wouldn't want to, live in a small enclosure, right? Would you? I'm like, no, right, right. Uh, but then, well, if you're an animal with different
yeah.
nature, things are like very different, right? So
Hmm.
maybe it doesn't really matter. But also, apparently, if some animals want to eat their own poo, right? I'm like, well, I don't want to eat my own.
Yeah.
But then for the animal, in some maybe some exceptional case, maybe there's some good biological reason or something like that, right? Um, I don't know. I
Well,
mean, I think say probably in many cases it's um, not needed, but maybe if it's like mother dog's cleaning up all the her den for where puppies are, maybe
yeah.
it'd be an explanation in that case. But and the one you describe, I don't have no idea. We have to ask a vet or somebody, or uh, you
Yeah, I
know.
think that's probably part of uh the the sort of brute fact that it happens. I mean, sure you can
Mhm.
find that in humans, but uh humans doing these, bizarre things, but with animals, right, you're right. I think there's something about it that just pertains to the nature of that creature. As a dog returns to his vomit,
Mhm.
there might just be something about the nature of a dog that, uh, yeah, that uh, indicates um, it doing those things. I- yeah, and as if to, again, kind of reforge or remake or reinstitute the distinction between the human animal and the non-human animal.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Like there's wisdom there in the repeated experience of seeing animals do these things over time that maybe doesn't warrant a deep investigation into why uh they act the way they do. The fact is that they act this way.
Mhm. Mhm.
They engage in this sort of behavior. Um, yeah, deriving meaning though from that, I think is or coming to a sense of deriving meaning from that. I think that relates to uh, another topic that I'd like to discuss with you. If you're ready to move on, um, if not, then we can pause on that.
Maybe
There's
just
some
one
more
more thing
stuff on
about
speech, I think that we
yeah,
need to
just
touch
one more
on.
thing maybe about the speech is so there's the famous case of what Nim Chimpsky, the chimpanzee, where Herbert Harris at Columbia University went to try to like train him in some version of American Sign Language. And he was convinced Nim had like speech at the end, basically like human speech, because even if someone can do American Sign Language, right, and it's syntactical, right, then it's correct, right? But at the end,
Yeah.
when funding ran out, interestingly, Herbert Harris, when he reviewed the data later, actually changed his mind.
Mm,
Because if you look at like the syntactic structure of stuff, it's basically like just a bunch of kind of signs or words, so to speak, right? They're just grouped together. So like a
yeah.
lot of the utterances are like not that complicated, like maybe a couple of signs together or such, right? Or three, or the longest one Nim ever gave was literally this: give me, give, eat, orange me, eat, orange give me, eat, orange give me you. 16 signs. But if they say that if a 2-year-old said this to you,
Babbling.
you'd say
Yeah.
there's something wrong with you. You need to go to a psychologist. This
Yeah.
is definitely not syntactical or even a sentence. So if you look at this case, even Coco the gorilla, right?
Hmm.
This is not clearly not propositional
Yeah.
or even really a sentence. And even in cases where there are things that are like seem like, oh, maybe it is kind of syntactical, like dirty monkey. Well, there's this cases where sometimes really the ape is just an uncomfortable situation. So dirty is like a sign to go to, or dirty monkey to go to the toilet,
Hmm.
because it felt like this was like where a place where he could get out of trying to be trained in ASL or such, or have
Yeah.
a different change of environment, change of scenery. So some of the
Yeah.
cases where it even looks like it's syntactical, there's usually much simpler explanations. So that's why like Herbert Terrace changed his mind. But then even the problem I think of some of these videos in like documentaries like Coco the gorilla, uh, or maybe other cases, is you have a narrator go over, or sometimes even the trainers themselves, and they're just reading totally into like, oh, the really Coco means this. Coco wants to play with the kitten. Then you actually go back and like really look very carefully. If you were to do like an actual like type out of the actual words that's
Yeah.
being said, it's basically like almost like gibberish. Like the words themselves are meaning, but like the whole is clearly non-syntactical. So unless
Yeah. Yeah.
you're like anthropomorphizing, right, and reading in too much here, it's pretty, I think, clearly in my opinion, that these apes, yeah, they've learned something. Give these signs, and then you get all sorts of food rewards or attention or such. But there's no notion of sentences or predication that this is actually modifying the subject, right, of the sentence
Yeah.
or so forth. So
Yeah. Right. Right.
um, I think this is why most sober researchers, right, apart from some case where people get maybe too attached to the gorilla, right, that they're actually
Yeah.
taking care of, realize that this is not really full blown human language, at least not
Yeah. For sure.
sentences, right? On that topic. So there's a good video actually on this by called what, NPR Skunk Bear. I'm like, what's it called? Something like, what are those talking apes saying?
Hmm.
Where it goes over some of these studies.
Hmm.
Can apes really talk to humans? It's quite good. It goes over some of these studies, and I think gives it quite useful analysis, I think, of some of them.
Yeah. I was thinking, Jane Goodall just died. She passed away recently. And I I forget exactly what her position on it was. I think a lot of oh look, the primates are actually using language has just dropped. I think there's something that's as there's been a holdover of it to where people still maybe kind of believe it. But I get the sense that a lot of that is dropped in favor of like, I don't know, the social emotional intelligence or something of primates and
Mm-hmm.
others. But it'd be worth seeing too what she thought. Um,
I think she might be have come around to the general view about animals not at least having speech like we do,
yeah,
or at least like in
makes
the
sense.
like sentence sort of view, right? She was quoted though when she first saw what tool use in chimpanzees
Hmm.
with like her mentor such, um, saying back like, oh wow, either we'll have to redefine tool, or maybe like what it is to be human, or this is like some huge thing where all of a sudden, oh well, they must be able to be like the same in kind as us because they can use tools, which I find very strange because you have texts way back in Aristotle, him knowing about tool use, and Albertus Magnus.
Sure.
It's not like Aquinas or many of these people who held there was a difference in cognitive kind between what reason and the estimative sense, right? That they wouldn't
Yeah.
have known that there was tool use in animals. So it's kind of funny how it just kind of this whole history, I think, was kind of forgotten for a while.
Yeah.
I think large part because of modern philosophy, but then you also have what behaviorism. I think of what the early 20th
Skinner.
century,
Yeah.
where it's just like you can only account for the exterior behavior. You can't really read anything into any sort of cognitive states,
Yeah, and I
which I
think
think has gone by the wayside now. But if that's like what as far back as people read, right, then it's like, well, that would be kind of like an extreme of where there's too little attributed to animals for the behaviorist view in terms of cognition.
yeah. Yeah, you mentioned modern philosophy there. I think I was reading Garrigou-Lagrange and his critique of pantheistic evolutionism, and I was thinking, wow, this I think this has gone a long way in conflating and confusing uh, the yeah, let's say the proven and the common sense view on animal speech in particular, right? Because uh, for the pantheists, pantheism is a serious confusion of the finite and infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And you get someone like Skinner who comes along and looks at behavior and is like, wow, the expressions of behavior are infinite. Um, you just matter and motion and the flux and I mean, oh, look at all these different ways that the animals are communicating through behavior. It would be very easy, I think, if that's on that assumption to just carry it into language, to carry it into on one hand, the possibility that animals can actually, they have the capacity to do human language. And on the other hand, you know, just flat out saying that that's what they're doing. Um, and so that from the tool to the language and doing this sort of thing, I, I see that as a confusion, right? That has been that was initiated with with pantheism, I reckon, um, and a general kind of scientific arrogance or something that we've blown past Saint Albert and Saint Thomas and Aristotle, who they're not really doing, whatever the narrative is. Um, but then we find our way find ourselves coming back to a lot of these insights now that we've dropped a little some of the baggage. I'm doing some writing on quantum physics too, John, and quantum physics in a lot of ways looks like a return to the book of creation, like the substantial forms are sort of conveying, the power and presence of their creator.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there's a kind of spiritual throb in which the creatures through their activity are through their existence, right, are conveying the self-subsistent existence of their creator as a likeness, as something distinct and not essential, if you will. But yeah, hopefully, if we just keep up this work of going back to the bestiaries and Aristotle and Thomas and others, will uh, more and more bring out the the shortcomings and failures of modern, animal behaviorists and others that are uh, yeah, I think have confused a lot of people about animals, uh, and yeah, I would say, and I don't know what you think about this. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but in trying to um like enchant the world through their scientific empirical work, they've they've sort of disenchanted things, uh, which how ironic, but I don't. My mind isn't set on fire hearing Jane Goodall or even seeing her around apes and hearing her talk about tool use and stuff. You know, I get a lot of more. I get more of my enchantment from reading what Aristotle says or what Bonaventure says or what Albert says and then observing it for myself. Like I read Augustine talking about the owl, as a symbol of ruin. And I go out in my front porch and I listen to the owls,
Hmm.
and I'm like, wow, that's what the sound is.
Hmm.
Um, but the enchantment of like the owl doing the hoo, and like that's not really even
Hmm.
the sound they're really making. Um, and so how many scientific people were behind, creating a sort of caricature or copy of the owl that that's not what I experience when I read Augustine and go out of my home and hear for myself.
I think they're both, in my case, I think they're both interesting. So, I mean, there's the things Jane Goodall says, like sometimes fine, sometimes maybe not so much, but maybe I haven't watched enough videos about her, but I find it kind of, in my case, actually kind of fascinating, at least the photos, photo imagery, right? But I haven't watched, I don't know,
Sure.
like any like long documentary or such about her. But I think being around animals though, like long term, like I was in Costa Rica, at, like an animal refuge or a
Hmm.
refugio for like a semester. What was it, like year
With
and a
the
half ago?
capuchin monkeys,
Something
right?
like that. Yeah, oh, there were tons of stuff there.
Okay.
There were ocelots. Um, we had like a 12-foot 12-foot American crocodile.
Wow.
Crazy, yeah, crazy
It's a
big. The
huge.
biggest in the country actually. That was at least in outside of the wild. And then reticulated python that normally is native to what, like Indonesia or such places, but somebody had it as a pet, and then it was either surrendered or confiscated by the police. It was, it might have also been like 12 feet long, I
Hmm.
think, at least nine. It was huge, right?
Hmm.
But and then even going out to like national parks down there where you see these things in the wild, there is something, I don't know, that's fascinating to actually like see it in person. Or I saw like a spider going up and down at night one time. I was coming back from doing my laundry, which was outside,
Yeah.
just like with its
Hmm.
web, kind
Hmm.
of rolling it really fast in this ball. That
Yeah.
I think is just really fascinating experientially, right? But then I guess the issue is um, trying to explain what's happening in some of these cases. Like some kind of it's pretty easy for maybe for the spider web case, right? But for some other cases, is where I think some of the earlier thinkers way back when I think have some insights that have
Hmm.
been forgotten about
Yeah.
how do we differentiate the different faculties or such or cognitive abilities, right?
Hmm.
Like the estimative sense, thanks to Islamic philosophy,
Yeah.
Avicenna, uh,
He's the
I
guy.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
has quite the contribution that has been given. It's not wasn't so much really in Aristotle, but then it's kind of been it's basically eclipsed, I think, by Descartes. And then everybody more or less after kind of just pretends it
Hmm.
doesn't exist because Descartes, I think, gives this different account of what thinking is, where it includes sensation and what would normally be like the internal senses and imagination all within thought.
Yeah.
And so in that case, then animals, well, yeah, then they all basically do what we do, right?
Yeah.
But you wanted to talk about what exemplars, yeah, or
Yes.
Bonaventurian exemplars?
Yes, I do. I very much so would like to do that. Um, it's interesting what you were just saying there, because I, I I wrote a paper that kind of attempts to show how Bonaventure understands emanation as perfect and imperfect. And uh, Garrigou Lagrange, when he's critiquing emanationism, he brings up the allegory or the metaphor found in some of the Neoplatonists and the Gnostics of a spider pulling its innards, right? Like making a web and pulling that out from its innards.
Mhm.
And The only two references I came across uh, where Bonaventure even brings up a spider in his sentence commentary. Uh, I, I'm kind of at the moment I'm blanking on one of them, but the other one has to do with intention.
Hmm.
This question of intention, and Bonaventure, one of his objections, uh, he writes that it seems that spiders make their web with intention,
Hmm.
and so perhaps intention applies to irrational agents, but he doesn't use a spider ever to as a metaphor or analogy for um, not allegory, analogy for emanation, right? Um, he's just that's not. I don't think he would use that. It's not a very good um, analogy or metaphor, in my opinion. But as you know, Bonaventure he has this kind of this view of natural truth and a view of truth as illuminative, you know,
Hmm.
and all natural truth for him has to lead to the illuminative. And one of his criticisms of um, natural philosophers or philosophers working in natural philosophy is that, and this is his criticism of Aristotle, as far as I can tell, is that they don't ever complete the science of contemplation because they're too curious and they're too concerned with nature itself, and
Hmm.
they don't consider natural things, natural beings in terms of their vestige or what they represent as a certain representation of uh, of the Trinity,
Hmm.
right? And so you can see how exemplarism, uh, how he likes that, right? Because creatures, what are they going to represent in terms of their exemplar? Where they're going to mirror something of the Trinity, whether in terms of production or equality or simultaneity or whatever it may be. Okay, but up till now, this doesn't lead us to think that there's some glorified animal in heaven that's going to be awaiting us or whatever. But this is the what I want to talk to you about because you're someone who's very much working in um very familiar, I would say, too, with the Aristotelian Thomistic um tradition. But I want to get not that Thomas just rejects exemplars, of course, or exemplary causes. He doesn't. There's a line. It's a very interesting line in Bonaventure's Breviloquium, and I'll just read it to you, and you comment on it. You go to town. He says this: vegetative and sensitive beings do not possess the power of perpetual life and eternal duration that is reserved to the higher state, and so their whole substance will be consumed. He's thinking consummationally, like judgment fire, end of things, right? However, they will be preserved as ideas, and in a certain manner, they will survive also in their likeness, humankind, who is kin to creatures of every species. And so one can say that all things will be made new and, in a certain sense, rewarded in the renovation and glorification of humanity. Some people will use this to kind of, um, you see, like David Bentley Hart or others, that they will use this to sort of, they may use this to advocate for universalism, like the restoration of all things. I don't think Bonaventure takes that view, like people are going to come out of hell and
Hmm.
and go to heaven. He doesn't take that view. He's not a universalist. But the idea of animals, right, of vegetative and sensitive beings, plants and animals, um, being made new, the possibilities thereof. I mean, that's a very interesting idea. What do you make of that?
So it sounded like from this passage, I'm not nearly as familiar with the Franciscan tradition as you are, but it sounded like he's denying uh after the end of the world and such, and then what, the resurrection of the body for humans, right, for good and bad, that there's going to be any more animals. Is that's what he's saying, right? At least from what I understand the passage. Is that right?
At least in the natural sense, animals as they are through natural generation, that's going to cease to be.
So is he saying like all animals besides what humans will go out of existence, but they'd still continue to exist in what the mind of God is what it was sounding like? At least that's how what I seem to be hearing here. But that's
Yeah.
that's what you think he's saying there.
I mean, uh, my interpretation is a little bit different. My reading of this, and I think this is supported in other places in Bonaventure, is that what he's talking about here is that with the cessation of natural generation, the resurrection of the body, the new
Mm-hmm.
earth,
Mm-hmm.
um, the vegetative and sensitive beings are going to be reformed into a gratuitous image. So they're going to be made into a reformed substance. That's my interpretation.
What would that mean though? That like you
Yeah,
have, I
exactly.
don't know, like a
That's
lion, but just doesn't eat anything or never reproduces or something
yeah.
like that, but that was like recreated? Or is there any cases where you don't have numerically distinct lion like that's around, I don't
Uh-huh.
know, like pre end of the world, then continues after? Because it sounds like you're saying they're all nine. But I mean, are there like ones that like, I don't know, God recreates suddenly, but then they
Yeah.
just don't reproduce and don't need to eat food or something like that? Um, uh, I mean, is he open to that possibility or no? Or is he denying that? Because I don't know if it's. I'm hearing a clear answer from the passage you read.
The I the so concerning the natural properties of this new creation,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in terms of the appetite or what have you, my mind doesn't go to that right off the bat. I think that's sort of open. I mean, look, if God is refashioning or remaking or completely renovating this new substance of that is a lion,
Mm-hmm.
God could create it such that it doesn't eat meat and it eats some kind of reformed vegetative being that resembles meat, for all I know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I tend to go to with exemplarity is always the sight of the thing, the image of the thing. Hence, like, my interpretation is that we're talking about a renovation of a new substance, or
Mm-hmm.
what Bonaventure would call a completed substance, a glorified substance. And I think, to me, my more Franciscan, I guess, sensibilities look more to the image um, of God in the new creation rather than the exercise of its particular uh, uh, appetites. Uh, and then I will stop there because what I'm about to say after that is pure speculation. Like like in a true sense, like speculative metaphysics questioning what is matter. Are we talking about a spiritual substance? Um, it's Halloween's coming up, and uh, my family, we like The Nightmare Before Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
and his dog Zero, right, is a natural dog. It died, and then it was made for Halloween Town or whatever, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's a ghost dog, right, that just kind of floats around. Well, how can we make of that in a realistic sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because look, in heaven, in the new earth and new creation, in the kind of light of exemplarity, we're not talking about ghost dogs, like that,
Mm-hmm.
like Zero from The Nightmare Before Christmas. But what
Spooky body.
but yeah, but however, a glorified substance, right, is going to have to, I think, resemble in some way, say, like primo materia, spiritual matter of some sort, a body of light, right? but the question I think is really what is the fundamental property that would be retained in an image like that? Uh, I like SCOTUS in this way. I mean, I think when it comes to dogs in particular, maybe not humans, but when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to animals, a dog in particular, the retaining of the will into this reformed substance seems to fit the bill. I mean, whatever the image of the animal is, say of a dog in particular, you're going to have some continuity of the will from its natural form to its supernatural form because the continuity because the will is what is involved in the production and making of that completed substance because the divine art is I mean it's God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd have to have some holdover there. Whatever the image is, you know, it can be retained, but the will has to be consonant or resonant with it.
You mean the divine will?
Well, the will of the creature, uh, the will of the
Or the,
creature, because the very reason for its existence is in the divine will. Uh,
so that the appetites there have to be some sort of what similarity between them between before and after.
uh, or I mean, without being too uh, seeming too like I'm cutting hairs here, or the way that that creature moves uh, towards its end, or
Mm-hmm.
towards its, or the way the creature moves in its activity uh, as being the thing it is, that has to be there has to be similarity there.
Yeah, insofar as it's the same, yeah, for sure. I think insofar as it's what proceeding from, how would we say, something intrinsic to what type of
Hmm.
substance it is,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So the
Hmm.
powers flow ultimately from something in the essence.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I mean, how to say exactly what that is, I think can be difficult
Mm.
because we often name animals or what distinguish them based on their properties or such, right? Or in many cases,
Yeah.
accidental features what hold for the most part. Um, is yeah, is eating meat essential to being a lion, for example, or such. But yeah, I
Hmm.
think there has to be something, right? In general, right? Uh, Otherwise, I don't know why you would even call it the same sort of creature.
Yes. Uh, right. The It's interesting. Bonaventure seems to want to handle this by sort of rearranging properties.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kind of like how he sort of rearranges Aristotle's customary virtues. Uh, not not like removing them or it, we reorder them and think about uh, them in different aspects, different ways. Uh, we get to the conclusion utilizing Aristotle, uh, even if he himself didn't understand himself in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you know, a property is just anything that belongs to that creature, whatever it may be. Well, that's a very convenient way of thinking about uh, 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 the properties in the sense of, say, like Anselm's view of truth, like rightness perceptible to the mind or congruity perceptible to the mind. So, like, you know, in Bonaventure's Itinerarium, the list of properties, right, are those properties that God gives to creatures to return creatures back to him. So, plenitude, magnitude, uh,
Mm-hmm.
etc. It
Mm-hmm.
these aren't things that disagree with those particular natural properties,
Mm-hmm.
right? They just sort of kind of enhance or bring that out
Mm-hmm.
in a maybe a more fuller way. So I know there's a lot of ink spilled over the question of you know, you say were lions carnivores in the Garden of Eden. I'm not even certain that you have to answer in the affirmative or negative to that in order to sense the glorified substance engaging in an activity that is still in keeping with its natural activity. Uh, you might, for example, I mean, think about it like this. This is purely speculative, but I mean, can we imagine a lion engaging in a chase, um, of some prey animal, and then upon capturing this animal, the animal dissipates, and but the meat, the kill, the product that the animal uh, would consume appears, right? We're talking creation out of nothing, like
Hmm.
just almost like magic. Would that, is that possible in this world? Are we talking in paradise of the 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 living a living simultaneity with creation out of nothing? You know,
Hmm.
what's actually, I mean, my point is there are ways I think of configuring a sort of exemplary or ideal state of uh, animal being that that makes some sense to us, even if we can't fully comprehend it. But that's okay,
Hmm.
right? I
Hmm.
mean, shortly after Bonaventure writes this in the Breviloquium, he just ends with this long uh, Anselm's concluding statement on the goodness um, uh, that awaits us, right, in eternity. And it's this beautiful, statement on just that the sublimity of these things. Uh, we scarcely can imagine it, but we still have a sense of it. The question is just, I think if we can say that there is some similarity
Hmm.
um, between the natural form and its glorified form,
So
then the rest is left up to the prerogative of the divine art.
yeah, is so initially in the quote, it sounded like the reading of it, at least when I was hearing it, was that he's totally denying these animals even exist post resurrection, right? But then now it's
Well,
sounding like you're saying that there like another passage where it talks about the reformed that they do, or is there just ambiguity in the Bonaventure?
he says,
Because it sounded like you're of the view that
yeah,
these animals will there'll be, I don't know, some special extra cool lion
yeah. Well,
that's like some sort of still lion, but there's maybe some additional special qualities of it,
so he
kind of
says
to
their
go along with
whole
the
su-
what resurrected humans.
he says their whole substance will be consumed. Because vegetative and sensitive beings do not possess, as having
Mm-hmm.
natural soul, right,
Mm-hmm.
or vegetative souls, do not possess the power of perpetual life and eternal duration that is reserved to the higher state.
Mm-hmm.
And so their whole substance, I'm assuming their whole natural substance,
Mm-hmm.
their body, which isn't made in the image of
Mm-hmm.
God, their souls, which are not made in the likeness of God, will be
Mm-hmm.
will be consumed. However, he says immediately after, they will be preserved as ideas. So that's one way they're being preserved somehow, even though
Yeah.
their natural substance is being consumed. They'll somehow be preserved as ideas, first off. And then he says, this is the tricky part. And in a certain manner, they will also survive in their likeness, humankind. And
Oh.
so the question is, what does it mean for animals, natural animals, to be preserved as ideas
Mm-hmm.
and as likenesses through humankind? And so the idea would
Okay.
be that God and the divine art could reform the idea and the likeness into some new substance because of the renovation and glorification of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, because of some prerogative in the divine will that
Hmm.
wants to accord humankind with um a reward
Hmm.
or whatever it may be,
Hmm.
um as something that is of the idea and likeness of vegetative and sensitive beings. So it's kind of a step to say. So on one hand, one would say, okay, so these things are going to survive as ideas and as likenesses through humanity. Okay, so what does that mean? That doesn't
Hmm.
mean that the natural animal or the vegetative being which has been consumed is going to be reformed into a new substance, right?
Hmm.
It just means that humans will carry on the idea of the plant or the animal, and that maybe in some way they'll have an attribute that is uh, relative to a plant
Hmm. Hmm.
or an animal. You think of like, you think Saint Roch or Saint Augustine or whoever. You see
Hmm.
them with the attribute of the animal, right? And so we don't need to involve the reformation of a substance.
Hmm.
Um, that's not necessary, but it could be. That's kind of my
I mean,
view. If it's a more completed substance
mhm.
to go that way, and if there can be continuity or similarity, you, one could say that
I think
without that being so problematic.
my reading of the text, that I mean, unless there's some context or another passage I'm missing, is it sounds like he's saying they'll continue to exist what in the mind of God.
Hmm.
In the mind of God, well, you have all sorts of things that what have gone extinct that still exist, like the dodo bird, for example.
Yeah.
Like that, it's still we can say what idea in some sense in the mind of God, but there's nothing in reality that corresponds with it anymore, even though at some point there was, right?
Hmm.
You also have what non-existent things. There are things that could have been that don't exist. Maybe some species that could have been created but just has never been. That could be in the mind of God, right? But it's not like existing. And then, well, what does he say? Continue to exist in what is he? The kin or the likeness? What is it? A man?
Yeah, and in a certain manner, they will also survive in their likeness, humankind, who is kin to creatures of every species.
Yeah. So there, I just take it as that's what he's saying is well, animals are kind of like humans. We're kind of like them. We
Mhm.
share a genus. We have what sense appetites. Animals have sense appetites, you could say. We have what interior senses. Animals have interior senses, cogitative power estimatives, right? All so forth. But um, and because we're what in well, we're included in animals. Yes,
Yeah.
that insofar as we continue to exist, like yeah, kind of the animals do insofar as like we're included in them and they're kind of like us. And then as what kin, I don't know if he means we're related. I don't think he quite goes for the whole evolution thing, but
Mhm.
at least I'm not sure on this for Bonaventure, but um, that I don't know, we get along with them or because we're included in the same genus of animals. So my reading is just that humans continue to exist and they're kind of like animals, so animals kind of exist there, but it's not like you will encounter a new lion. From my
Mhm.
at least prima facie reading the passage is that no lions will continue. No, only humans.
Mhm.
But the animals, yeah, they're kind of there in the mind of God, kind of there insofar as humans are still continuing also. Um, but they're basically like cheetahs, monkeys, lions, chimps, they're all gone. That's what I take Bonaventure is saying,
Yeah.
at least how I hear it. But it sounds like you're saying there's maybe another reading. I don't know. Is a popular interpretation, or some people take this? Maybe
Well,
David Bentley Hart take
I
this
think,
that
yeah.
there's meaning to actually by continuing to exist in humans that well you humans you get
Uh,
beat to vision but since I don't know you're good you also get a body but beyond that you also get kind of some added bonuses like here's something better than your favorite pet dog that can keep you
yeah.
company. Is that what you're saying kind of?
Well, it's I tie it I take this passage in the Breviloquium and I sort of tie it to others because
Hmm.
he's not very explicit. I mean, this is probably the most
Yeah.
explicit he gets about it right here. And in Bonaventure, as some scholars have said, he doesn't really state his doctrines ex professo.
Mm.
Um, he leaves a lot up to you to figure out, like he gives you, the a basic Aristotelian picture of the world, right? He also gives you very Augustinian picture of the world. He's like bring those together the best you can. Um,
Mhm.
and regarding this, given that Bonaventure was so close to Francis, and he made such great efforts to articulate Francis's vision, it's a question of, what exactly is the exemplar for animals. There are other passages though that um you know that indicate that these exemplars have to exist. I mean, like in other words, not just in the mind of God, not just in the common being of
Mhm.
humans that exercise
Mhm.
some of those things, but that there's
Mhm.
actually an exemplar for these animals,
Mhm.
that is in the mind of God, but that is not just being in the mind, but actually exists in reality.
Mhm.
Because Bonaventure takes Anselm's, generally takes Anselm's view there, which I know Thomas, he didn't like so much. But if these creatures go extinct, these natural creatures go extinct, they subsist as a principle, Bonaventure says. Okay, well, if they're subsisting in the sort of the original love of God, right, and it's better for these, I'll say it like this for now, like these sublime participations in God, if it's better for them to exist not only in spirit but also in substance, as a composite of some sort in some glorified way, then that's what God would choose to do. That's what God would would will them to be. And so, I think I think maybe hear me out on this. Um, like Bonaventure's not really a Platonist. I mean, he's a hylomorphist. And what he wants to see with creatures, right, is their full exemplification in spirit matter and in the bond of love between them,
Mhm.
right? And so when I piece things together, it just makes sense for me to say that given all this, given Bonaventure following
Mhm.
Anselm and
Mhm.
Francis and Aristotle and so on, that these exemplars would exist in reality. They wouldn't just be something immaterial in the
Mhm.
mind of God.
Mhm.
Um, of course, they wouldn't be the natural thing because the natural thing has the deficiencies needed. I'm sorry, the deficiencies that disqualify it as a candidate for this, ex, you know,
Mhm.
exemplar.
Mhm.
And
But
so it just kind of makes sense to me, like, and then you read the stories of the saints, and you hear about these preternatural occasions of these animals. Like you think of John Bosco and his dog that just would, I mean, talk about a ghost dog. It
Mhm.
was a dog that everyone thought was just a normal dog, but it would just, it was vanished, like almost like it had bilocation. I mean, stuff like this, just it's like why wouldn't that be the case on grounds of a lot of philosophy, a lot of hagiography, and so on. But I grant that this passage, yeah, of course, it's not, it doesn't, state uh, that Anselm's ontological argument is operating here, and the exemplars and just in humanity or in the mind of God.
Mhm.
It's actually there as a new substance. Um, one time someone told me, John, uh, when they lost their dog, and they're like, oh, I won't see my dog in heaven, which is, by the way, I mean, that's true. If you take it in the direction, like, you're not, the dog that passed away its natural form, the German like, you're not going to see that, even according to this my argument here. You're not going to see that in heaven. What you're going to see is going to be completely new. Uh, um, but someone told her, you know, well, why do you think you're not going to see your dog in heaven? And she's like, there are no animals in heaven. And this lady said to her, have you read the book of Revelation? Uh, there are animals in heaven, even if only the metaphysical animals, and even if only just the Lamb of God. But of course, there's just a whole lot of there are veils, things veiling
Mhm.
our recognition of that. I'm still inclined to think, I don't know, I didn't hard to
Wouldn't it
make sense. Yeah.
wouldn't it be most ironic though if the order that people most affiliate with animals, the Franciscans and St. Francis, if one of the most prominent members, Bonaventure, denied that animals will continue to exist in the afterlife? It'd be a big shock for PETA, right?
Well, let me tell.
Or
Well,
maybe they'd be very upset, right? Then, but
yeah,
I'm just trying to make maybe a humorous point. I mean, I'm inclined to think
sure.
because you have something in Thomas, right? That what one creature can't fully reflect the goodness of God because God will his essence is his existence, right? So you
Right.
need more than one, but particularly a plurality of species.
Yeah.
So you have angels and all the different angelic species. You have man, who's a species like the highest of the material species, but then you have all these other animals, and then plants and minerals and such. So if there wasn't maybe animals in some form, it would almost seem like there's some sort of gap in the creation, in the new creation,
Yeah.
that maybe in some way they have to be there. Now, of course, I would argue for various reasons they're not seeing the beatific vision because you need an intellect for that to be
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
possible in the first place, right? Because the way in which what people see God, so to speak, in the afterlife in heaven is not through like some gaze of the eyes or the level of sensation.
Yeah.
It's totally removed from any sort of matter, whether particular or common. And well, the estimative sense in animals just can't do this. Like, and there's pretty strong
Right.
evidence that
Right. Right.
there's no
And I
way
fully
to
agree.
grasp. I think
Yeah.
um, fully material realities, right?
Yeah.
Um, but um, yeah, maybe there's some way they. I mean, maybe not numerically the same, right? Um, but it would be funny though if the if what the Franciscans were not so in favor of this as people may think. The Franciscans are less animal lovers than,
Yeah. Well, my
than people make them out to think, right? Um,
yeah. Well, I'm really glad. I mean, I think I've brought this up before. Uh, I mean, that's definitely true. In some way, you know, the the portrait of Francis as this just, I mean, just
super
you know,
sentimental
yes, the super sentimental.
animal. You hug the bear, hug the grizzly bear.
Yeah, yeah. Don't do that. Yeah,
I
that
mean,
I
I mean,
mean
on the popular view of Francis.
that's a sort of 19th century invention, and it's largely a Protestant invention. Um, but you don't even see that much in Francis. He had a I forget how I put it, but he being so attuned to the truth of the creature, even in a supernatural sense, the way it transmits itself into like the natural care of animals, it doesn't look like that at all. It doesn't look super sentimental. In fact, it looks a lot like a farmer would treat his animals. I mean, Francis curses the sow because the sow, maybe almost because Francis is ascribing intention to the animal, perhaps, but Francis curses the sow because the sow I think killed a neighbor's ewes, their little lambs. So
Hmm.
Francis
Hmm.
curses the sow dies. You know, like so when Bonaventure comes together with Francis, there's a lot of tampering that's done to where the actual Franciscan picture of the animal, it's not super sentimental at all.
Hmm.
Uh, it kind of is theologically speculative, even if only in the sense that, oh, maybe there's a reform the natural substance is consumed, but then maybe God will renovate it. There'll be a new
Hmm.
creation.
Hmm.
Sure, but that's because that represents an exemplary cause that
Hmm.
guides the mind in the perfection of its work, not because the Franciscan just wishes, that animals are something other than what they are,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
that animals are it's my fur baby or whatever. Um, uh,
Do we,
so in a sense that's true. However, you know, I still think there's a kind of special magnetism that those of a Franciscan persuasion uh have with animals. I mean, I have my dog's kennel is here. She's a mutt. Her name is
Mhm.
Jade. Mm. And Jade's my bitch. I mean, and it's it's funny how I'm properly designating her as that because she is that. There is a completion of a sort of picture of reality that's very satisfying, you know. I treat Jade like a dog. That's maybe something that's fallen out of fashion. I treat her like an animal because she is one.
Mhm.
But in that is satisfaction.
Mhm.
Uh, and I found myself sometimes in how I'm relating to her. I'm like, this is what Francis did. This is the
Mhm.
same. This is exactly how Francis was
Mhm.
with the
Mhm.
animals, and it doesn't look sentimental. It doesn't look. It does also doesn't look vulgar or crass. It
Mhm.
looks like it's like how God intended man to have dominion
Mhm.
with these creatures, and it's kind of perfect.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I think someone of that persuasion could agree with PETA on some things. Like we don't really need to be slaughtering pigs for military triage care to train, Marines and soldiers to do that sort of thing. We really don't need to. But the ambitiousness and the ferocity with which PETA goes about that is uncalled for.
Mhm.
They can be so rabid in that because they have a distorted view of humans and animals. Like they think that the animal is like really actually living in them somehow, and by causing violence to the animal, you're causing violence to people like me. And
It's almost
I
like
mean,
they're like just little humans, but they
yeah,
look
yeah,
different.
right,
They look
right. They're
different.
personites. They're or persons that are deserving of the same treatment as human beings. And I think there's a lot of kind of bizarre solipsism that goes on with it too. Like they see the animal, and it's like when you're hurting the animal, you're in, you're hurting the sensitive appetite in me. You're 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 doing that sort of act, and it's like they're taking that on themselves. Well, that's crazy. I mean, that's crazy in a sense. There are some stories of Francis kind of being vicarious in a way, but their intention or his intention is always on the truth of the gospel.
Mhm.
When you divorce that from when you divorce the gospel from animal advocacy, I mean it's just lunacy.
Mhm.
I would say, in the strict
Mhm.
sense of what that word means, it's just lunacy. It's vicarious activism without some termination. And with that, you're just going to get not a slippery slope, but it's like I think I mentioned this to you. There are people that were on campus that were advocating that humans come and get their breast milk because it's good for the animals. I mean that's the kind of lunacy that stuff leads to.
Mhm.
Like, come drink human breast milk because it's better for the environment, it's better for the cow. What do you do with
Better
that?
for humans. Yeah.
Infantilization. Uh, yeah, all sorts of stuff. I mean, so with Francis, he kind of he can't really be pinned down to this static model. On one hand, maybe he's expressing um, the that harming animals is an injustice, or it's an infliction of something that he's a part of. You see some of those, but you also see Francis taking this other radical side to it, where it's just like cursing animals. It's like you damn dirty pig, you know. It's like, do you see that kind of thing among uh uh PETA type people, where they're carrying on about we don't need to hurt animals, we don't need to hurt animals, but then they're kicking the kitten as they're walking down the street. I imagine you get some you know you get the opposite thing that you intend. I imagine you get that with some of those people, but I don't know. I venture to say a lot of them they would dare treat an animal like an animal, or I think you get my point, maybe. Yeah.
Um, do some like videos on your channel about St. Francis with animals. You can generate all the AI ones of him eating meat,
Yeah. I
right?
should. I should do
Yeah.
that.
So you can show him, look, St. Francis is eating eating meat, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
because
I
he ate some, right? At least
Of course.
even as a Franciscan, right? And
Of
I don't
course.
Franciscans don't have there are some orders that are basically vegetarian, I think, right? Or like are the Carmelites? They might be. Um, but the
Of
Franciscans they still eat meat today, right?
course.
Yeah. So maybe it's
I,
the Carthusians.
oh, that sounds more like the Carmelites. I'm pretty sure they eat meat.
Yeah, I think it's Carthusians. Carthusians, yeah. 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 But they're you know, um like a special left and really strict, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to look into that.
Yeah.
I there were some. I was hanging out with some Capuchin friars one time, and I saw that they were. I was teaching an ethics class, so I had the animal ethics stuff on my mind, and they were eating their beef or whatever they were eating. It was meat, and I was like, oh, father or brother so and so. I forget if he was a priest or not, but I was like, oh, you eat meat, you know. Uh, I would have thought maybe you would abstain or something along those lines. He got the point because he responded and said, "Oh, basically my position now that it doesn't matter if you're eating meat or not. What matters is whether you give thanks to God. If you're grateful for what you're receiving, that's all that really matters." And that effectively, I think for some of my students, effectively put an end to their um, veganistic, vegetarianistic tendencies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I just pray for it and I thank God for the sacrifice of this animal, that's all that matters. And it,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, that's all that does matter when we consider the causes behind the slaughtering of that animal, which are largely painless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Temple Grandin, I really like her because I think she's done some of the most good for um, bringing out the kind of common sense view of industrial animal production.
What's the name again?
Temple Grandin. I think
Brandon.
she's still lecturing at the University of Colorado in Boulder, I think is the
Yeah.
school. There's a movie about her too, but she's like an autistic woman. Um,
Yeah.
but she's really into animal. I forget what her PhD is. It might just be animal
Interesting.
science.
Yeah.
She completely um, I would say revolutionized the cattle industry. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she recognized like that care for the animal, for the well-being of the animal, and efficiency in animal production aren't opposed to each other.
Mm-hmm.
She redesigned the way these slaughterhouses work so that when the
Mm-hmm.
animals go to their death, they're not stressed at all.
Mm-hmm.
They follow a path there. Everyone's really calm, and then the bolt gun to the head,
Mm-hmm.
and it's painless.
Mm-hmm.
It's so if the concern is slaughtering all the animals, what do they go through before they died? That doesn't hold up because um, the animal faces a very mitigated uh, process of dying. The animal doesn't feel any pain at all. Doesn't really know what's going on either. Uh, the way that uh, the slaughterhouses were ran before, maybe we had the sense that the animal had an awareness of their death, but they were just stressed out with the way
Mm-hmm.
the um, you know uh, how they were kind of channeled or funneled into the to
It
the
was
to the
too
area.
too crowded or such, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just wasn't efficient, but they were just stressed from
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
prodding and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that was involved in that. But she
Mm-hmm.
she fixed that. She changed that. Uh, she doesn't get a lot of airtime, probably because she's a scientist, so she realizes there's an efficiency need there that we can't destroy the economy. We can't just stop producing meat. But then also that she really actually did care, and she saw that these two things were compatible.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I've always thought of her as a uh, yeah, she's kind of a model of the Bonaventurian Francis
Mm-hmm.
sort of complex there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's interesting that um, cows aren't really the poster animal, so to speak, for PETA, right? There's a book I've been reading actually that I have here by Hall Herzog, Herzog,
oh
about
yeah,
kind of like it's called Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat, about kind of
yeah, yeah,
contradictions in people's thinking about animals.
yeah, yeah.
How you don't pick the ugly animals, the mosquitoes, or I guess, well, I mean, it's in the broad sense of animals, right?
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, biologically, you have another
Yeah.
category of animal beyond the Aristotelian sort of categories, but you don't pick, I don't know, rodents or rats or such as like
Mhm.
like the
Right.
poster animal for for PETA or against eating meat. They try to pick the more beautiful ones or cuddly ones, right? And try
The
to
charismatic
romanticize them,
species.
right? And so there's but the cows don't seem to be uh too high on the list of people complaining about like, oh, they're treated inhumanely or such, right? I think usually more like other species or like the pigs are too
Mhm.
close together and bite the tail off of the one in front of them or other such cases, right?
Mhm.
um like I think it seems like more the opposition to the cattle farming is more about what broadly like global warming concerns or such like that. It
That's
seems to be
part of it. Yeah.
my impression, right? More these days, but maybe it's because of her work though too. Maybe they just don't have as much. There's not as much maybe you can legitimately complain about in terms of how cattle farming happens these days.
Well, they tend to go with some ecologists have referred to it as a charismatic species.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for reasons that were already they're cute, they look they look cleaner, they look
Mm-hmm.
better. There's not a general disgust of
Mm-hmm.
them. However, just the other day, I saw um an animal advocacy poster. Wasn't by PETA, but an animal advocacy
Mm-hmm.
poster where it kind of blends the face of the cow with the face of the dog. And
Mm-hmm.
why do you, it's the same old thing. Why do you not eat dogs but you eat cows? Or why do you not eat dogs but you eat pigs when pigs are smarter than dogs? What's up with that? Or
Mm-hmm.
you're a
Mm-hmm.
speciesist, or whatever they say. But they're still doing that, I think. And I think, however, I was reading a paper the other day about why leftists, to maybe make this social political for just a moment, why they became such devout environmentalists when they were not
Hmm.
when it started. In the 1970s with Earth Day, they weren't on board with it because they didn't see ecology as
Hmm.
uh, relevant to their aims.
Hmm.
But then later on, it um, uh, they became very interested in that. But then whenever they initially became interested in it, they didn't think it mattered. It was important economically speaking. And then only
Hmm.
later, after people were harping on the essential economic nature of environmentalism, only then did they get behind it. But it's always been about whether they can accomplish for leftists, whether they can accomplish their political goals by getting behind an environmental cause. So regarding cows, I don't know heifers. I don't know what the issue there. I think they've just kind of realized that meat is something uh, that like needs to uh, be produced somehow. Of course, you got some like eco-modernists that want a lab-grown meat.
That
You
sounds
have,
disgusting, by the way. The lab grown meat.
yeah, it does.
I think they
Yeah,
banned it, didn't they? Thank God.
yeah. I don't think it's gonna see
At least
daylight.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say this too, John. I think you'll find this interesting. I know I was when I heard about it. Uh, Now, I'm not saying vegetarianism or veganism is only like a left of center kind of thing or whatever. I think it is in the majority, but I found that there are a lot of people on the left, a growing number of people that just they don't care. And the reason they don't care is because a lot of them assume indigeneity as their benchmark of authority. And when that happens, you cannot just easily say that being a true leftist or whatever is being a vegan or vegetarian. You follow like Cree hunting ethics or the practices of indigenous people, they consume meat. So I think there's just kind of an ambivalence by some people who were otherwise very, very much involved in animal advocacy. Uh, Given they've had, I think people on the left are further and further trying to find a place of authority. They don't want to do St. Francis because, St. Francis is problematic for reasons we've already brought up. And when they try to stake it out in indigenous practices or whatever, I mean, the only dietary rule that's left is to be like a flexitarian. Um, sometimes I eat meat, sometimes I don't. And this is a standard practice that we've seen in the church for forever. Some days you eat meat, sometimes you don't.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
matters is whether what the intention is in consuming whatever it is we're consuming, right? Um, and if we particularly love animals and we care about them, we want to make sure that practices are as humane as possible.
Hmm.
Like one thing that everyone can get behind who's working in uh philosophy of animal stuff is I I think Singer and Regan and others pointed out long ago, like factory farms are that's bad. You see the image of the factory farm worker, the video of the factory farm workers punching the baby calf in the face. Well, that's terrible in many ways. Like here's a guy who's denying all sorts of things to animals, and he ends up treating the animal like it's a human being, like he's in a bar fight with some guy. I mean, there's all sorts of confusion there. Uh, but then also, you know, I think I don't know what you think about Kant's view on this. Like the way we treat animals is can reflect the way we treat other people. Um, you can make that argument with it too. A whole host of other things. I think it should be pretty uncontroversial that certain practices of industrial animal production are 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 are
It's
um,
it's
very problematic.
the Kant quote. interestingly, this, I've heard this before and seen it actually, right? And like, there's this what place in Poland that I saw where it's like a bakery, but then on the side there's all these rabbits that you can feed. You have to pay money to feed them, right? It's like some kind of like cool bakery like business concept, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure the bunnies are also pretty happy too. But I remember there on the wall, there's all these quotes about animals from like philosophers. One of them being Kant,
Yeah.
which because usually what we think of Kant very cerebral, super abstract,
Yeah.
like a very fluffy bunny. And Kant, they seem to be very
Sure.
opposite, right? Extreme. So
Yeah.
I remember that's where I saw this quote quote one time. It was very, very striking. But it sounds almost like Aquinas though on that one, right? Because like Aquinas's argument, right, why you shouldn't be cruel to animals is more or less that it can what like lead to like insensitivity more or less or violence towards human beings, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. Maybe we could do an animal ethics topic in the
Yeah.
future, right? Because but there's like studies about apparently the number of people that have like done bad things to animals when they're young, or at least like a couple of case or two of cruelty, right? Is like a lot. But most
Yeah.
of them
Yeah.
don't grow up to be like serial killers or the like,
Right.
right? But on the other hand, there are plenty of people who are what serious hardened criminals who also have done bad things to animals, right?
Hmm.
So empirically, I don't know. I mean, I think there has to be some how do we say nuancing. Like, I mean, I'm inclined to believe maybe Aquinas here or Kant maybe is right. If someone like grows up and like is like total cruel streak for like I don't know like 10 years is out like torturing animals, like there's something seriously wrong with them, and they're
Hmm.
probably more likely to do like be insensitive to humans when they become an adult, right?
Yeah.
But like as bad as I think it still is that human when I don't know someone when he was like a 5-year-old, right? You know, tortured some animal one time. Like it's not necessarily like they're gonna end up to being like a serial killer or
Yeah.
such,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but I think there is I don't know. I think there is something for that argument, even though I know there's some what maybe questions in the literature on um, kind of the empirical correlation, right, or such, or not, right? Just because what do we say? All A is B and all C is B doesn't mean all A is B, right? Um, because all fruits are are what? All apples are fruits and all oranges are fruit doesn't mean all apples are oranges, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
even though you have what cases where sure maybe the majority of maybe hardened criminals, serial killers done terrible things to animals, right? Doesn't mean that all people who have done terrible things to animals are going to end up as serial killers, right? Um,
Hmm.
but nevertheless, I mean, one time action, but like a whole what pattern.
Hmm.
I'm sympathetic, I think, to Aquinas's argument here. But yeah, we could remember this. We could do another discussion sometime, right?
Yeah.
About
Animal
animal
ethics.
ethics, right? And then what's the grounding for, um, you know, why you shouldn't be excessively or needlessly cruel to animals or cruel to them, right? They had to define some of these terms too. So